to be here at the Southern Literature Alliance, where I've done one other thing, and it's always fun to be here. And I hope everybody in Chattanooga knows what a cool thing the Southern Lit Alliance is. It generates more intellectual energy than is available in many cities bigger than Chattanooga. So you all are lucky to have it and to have Rhett. And I'm lucky to be down here getting to see her and to see another old friend, Claire Vaye Watkins. I used to be able to count on seeing Claire just about every summer in Sewanee when she would teach in the Sewanee Young Writers Conference. We haven't had her at that conference in a while, so it's good to see you, Claire. It's hard not to think of Claire in relation to the place that she comes from and has written compellingly about. Claire calls herself a desert rat. It's a designation that she earned, and I'm sure you really earned it, by growing up in the arid country west of Las Vegas, in Tecopa, California, and then Pahrump, Nevada, which is nearby over the state line. Circumstances have taken her to many other places. Columbus, Ohio, where she earned a Master of Fine Arts degree in creative writing at Ohio State. Lewisburg, Pennsylvania, where she was at Bucknell. Princeton, New Jersey, where there's some other school, and now Ann Arbor, Michigan. And I was wondering about the sort of Big Ten whiplash that you experience as a Buckeye at Michigan. But her evocation of the desert Southwest, say the 250 miles between Las Vegas and Los Angeles, is so memorable and original as to make the region hers for as long as she wants to claim it. Her books are Battleborn. The title is the slogan woven into the state flag of Nevada, and Gold Fame Citrus. They show us a Southwest. That we haven't seen before, and that will remind you of nothing except itself. It's not, that is, John Ford's West. It's not Edward Abbey's West or Cormac McCarthy's West. You might meet a cowboy, but you are just as likely to meet an adult ex-hippie or a lost European tourist whose buddy is in the desert somewhere. If you come to something called a ranch in Claire's world, it's probably a legal brothel. In Claire's West, they test nuclear weapons and dump toxic waste, and the main thing they worry about is water. Battleborn was a huge hit, and those of us who keep track of Claire loosely got used to getting these modest little bulletins every few weeks that she won another prize. The Story Prize, the New York Public Library Young Lions Fiction Award, the Rosenthal Family Foundation Award from the American Academy of Arts and Letters. She was selected with 4 other precocious writers as one of the National Book Foundation's 5 under 35. Claire is married to another wonderful writer and a good friend, Derek Palacio. They are the parents of Esme, who's 1.5. If I know her, she's working on another book now, but I think tonight we will hear from her most recent one. So, welcome, Claire.
So I was instructed to speak a little bit about my work and to read some and to take questions. And so the ratio, I thought I would do it in that order. Speak a little bit, read a little bit more, and then maybe take more questions, if that's all right with you. Partly that's because I don't really know my own work very well. A lot of people like John and Adam Ross in the back, or Rhett, scholars and wise readers can articulate what I'm up to better than I can often. And that's kind of how I like it. I don't like to understand it too much, or else it might, I don't know, forsake me or something, you know. But I'll do my best in the Q&A. But I'll tell you a little bit about just the premise of Gold Fame Citrus. It imagines the culmination of the drought in the American West and uses Los Angeles as sort of the locus for the drought. And it's been described as a futuristic book and a dystopian book, which is cool with me. Like, I'm not into policing how other people describe it, but I actually don't think of it as either of those. I think of it as a Western and as a book about the past. It is set in the future, but its gaze is actually back, specifically to the California water wars in the first few decades of the 20th century. So, and that moment and that place, particularly because of the circumstances of my birth. I was born in the Owens Valley, which is a region on the eastern side of the Sierra Nevada. And I was born near the shores of Owens Lake, or what was once Owens Lake, because in fact, by the time I was born, Owens Lake had been drained by Mulholland and the Los Angeles Aqueduct project, which made Los Angeles into the city we know it to be today, a major American city, and not just a dusty oil town that it was before it figured out its water issues. And it figured it out in part by taking water. So that's where the epigraph for this book comes from, is from William Mulholland, the architect of the Los Angeles Aqueduct system. And he says, at the christening of the new aqueduct, he said, "There it is, take it." And so that's sort of the thesis of the book, if you will. What else to know? It has sort of some eco-fabulous veins to it, which were a surprise to me, and it also apparently falls into the genre of cli-fi, which is not, as I originally thought when I read that term, it's not a new subcategory of erotica. It is climate fiction. So both of those were news to me. I hadn't set out to write either of those. I just sort of went where my whims and fancies took me, and especially where my historical research took me, which was to the water wars, to the Mormon exodus, to the irrigation of the American West, and some mythic figures along the way, Sacagawea, John Wesley Powell, John Muir. They're all sort of the totems for the book. But you need to know nothing about that to know about what I'm going to read tonight. This is a chapter in the book that's about 200 pages in, and it's quite anomalous aesthetically and also in terms of story. So it has the advantage of having no spoilers at all. And it's, well, so I told you a little bit about where I was born. And then I grew up in Nevada, in this town that John mentioned, Pahrump. And it's the closest town to Yucca Mountain, which you might remember is the place where we're building the Yucca Mountain Nuclear Waste Repository, which will likely be the place where we put all of our nuclear waste as a nation. And every once in a while, I would get asked, like, "Oh, what do you think about that?" And this is as close as I can get to an answer. It's also the closest I've ever come to writing an explicitly political or didactic piece. So some of the other young writers and I were talking about the challenges of having deeply felt feelings about the natural world, perhaps even finding a sense of, the only sense that I know of, a spiritual dimension in the natural world at the same time as it's being more efficiently destroyed than ever before. So this is a piece that combines two of my interests, which are nuclear waste repositories and mole people. And it has a secret title, which I will tell you now. This is sort of a, what are those on the DVDs? The
Easter eggs?
Yes, thank you, Mike. Easter egg. Easter egg. So the title of this piece is Wasteland, Wasteland, Wasteland. The binder does not say mole men. The mole men are a rumor, a legend. So the old impinkened blind man with the puckered skin and long, translucent, prehensile whiskers we found in the desert near the repository is not a mole man. The binder, given to us ages ago by a gentleman representing the U.S. Department of Energy, says the nuclear waste repository at Yucca Mountain just up the road from our tiny gamblers' settlement in the desert, is unmanned. The binder, which we stored until now as directed on the wall of the county commissioner's office in a glass-faced case with a tiny hammer dangling from it, says the repository is unmanned, that the silent white bullet trains disappearing into the mountain and reappearing out the other side, empty, carry only casks, we read caskets, of spent fuel rods and pellets, and are unloaded by a gleaming robotic arm. The binder has pictures. The binder, whose protective glass face we have shattered with the tiny hammer, says the stainless steel caskets are unloaded by the robotic arm and transported by a fully automated conveyor system, or FACS, deep into the hollow earth, down the trellis of tunnels that took 100 years to dig, to their storage pods, where they will stay interred for 100,000 years. There are no people working inside Yucca Mountain, says the binder. The tunnels were dug by a state-of-the-art tunnel boring machine, or TBM. We are soothed by the authoritative, acronym-loaded binder delivered to us ages ago by the gentleman embodiment of the U.S. Department of Energy and stored in its secure glass-faced case beside the MSDS and the old, faded, terror alert color wheel. For since there are no people who dug the dark tunnels of Yucca Mountain, nor people working as stewards of the nation's nuclear waste deep inside, then it is only a rumor that there is a subterranean population at the Yucca Mountain Nuclear Waste Repository. Only local lore that below us, in a town perhaps identical to ours, move once human creatures whose genes the department tweaked over generations until their skin went translucent, until a scrim grew over their useless eyes, until two thick, cord-like and translucent whiskers sprouted from their faces, sensitive as a catfish's barbels, and their mouths gone a little catfish too, a side effect. The not mole man was discovered, sun-singed and unconscious, by a gang of teenagers at the Landscape of Thorns. Regarding the Landscape of Thorns, the binder quotes expert design of an architecture of peril to deter inadvertent human intrusion into the nuclear waste repository at Yucca Mountain by Magnus S. Geister of Cornell University, Manuel Brink, Sandia National Laboratories, and H.S. Travers, the University of Pennsylvania. Quote, "The marker is pan-cultural, pre-linguistic, post-linguistic, ominous, and repellent. It evinces the repository site as a non-place." The Landscape of Thorns was erected atop Yucca Mountain to frighten our distant and curious descendants on a primal level. It is an assembly of multilingual stone message kiosks and concrete spikes jutting from the mountain, skewering the sky. Our teenagers like to go up there to skateboard, rollerblade, bounce their tiny bicycles off its menacing concrete javelins. We've scolded them against this, but we live in a dinky desert town with one paved road. Our young people are fiends for concrete. When they were in elementary school, our young people took field trips to the monument and made rubbings from the message kiosks there. Our children once had the patience for a project like that. Now they dye their hair inky black without consulting us. They push safety pins through their eyebrows. Our refrigerators are still layered with curled etchings of star charts and the periodic table, and rubbings of warnings in Old English, Ancient Arabic, and something the placards at the kiosks call French. That's just a little joke for you linguistics majors out there. And by the way, these rubbings, getting a little echo, I'm just trying to fix that. The rubbings are actual quotes from the language that the scientific community has agreed that we should use to communicate about nuclear waste to the future, which, because nuclear waste is deadly for so very, very long, it will probably outlast us as a species. We're talking like geologic time. So it's essentially, this is the messaging that we're sending to beyond our demise, if you follow. The rubbings say, this place is a message and part of a system of messages. Pay attention to it. They say, this place is not a place of honor. No highly esteemed deed is commemorated here. Nothing of value is here. What is here is dangerous and repulsive to us. They say, sending this message was important to us. We considered ourselves to be a powerful culture. Since he is not a mole man, we assume the blind man our teenagers found is a desert wanderer. We come from a long line of desert wanderers, so we intend to treat him well. We set out finding a cool, dark place for him. A gambler's outpost in the sun-blanched, sand-scraped Mojave. We have many such places. The brothel offered him his own swamp-cooled bungalow, but when he came to, he seemed bashful somehow, with his humped posture and pinched nose, and the way he stood so politely clacking his pale, brittle claws together. Instead, we looked to the casino, a stucco cube with a gravel parking lot. We put him up in a suite, comped. We enrolled him in the Players Club with bonus play, express play, and multiplay, all comped. We granted him unlimited access to the buffet, where, with a bedraggled claw, he points to shrimp cocktail, steak and eggs. He tests the doneness of his eggs by probing the yolks with one slow, slick, opalescent barbel. Despite being a member of the Players Club at the platinum level, the not mole man finds no joy in playing Keno. For though we can see his eyes rolling lax behind the pale vellum of skin, he is blind as an oracle and can take no pleasure from the numbers bouncing around the television. He disdains video poker. His barbels recoil from the slots. When we gave him a bingo dauber, he tried to eat it, smeared his lipless catfish gape with a shimmer of teal lipstick. He will throw the bones at the craps table, if you ask him, but only after standing for a really long time with the dice cupped solemnly in one hand, running his index claw over their tiny dimples. Though we suspected as much, the fact that he knows nothing of bingo proves the desert wanderer is no ordinary old man. And though it says nothing of mole men, the binder given to us by the freckled personification of the long arm of the U.S. Department of Energy, which we have retrieved from its shattered glass case, says there may be, quote, contaminants. If a contaminant should enter the community, says the binder, you must quarantine it. Call this number, says the binder. If you cannot quarantine the contaminant, says the binder, kill it. The danger is in a particular location, say the rubbings. It increases toward a center. The center of danger is here, of a particular size and shape, and below us. Apparently, and according to the binder, we are the first line of defense against a threat that does not exist. Quarantine can be tricky here. Ours is a town where tourists stop on their way somewhere else. Ours is a way station where visitors dock in the dark and then, in the hammering sun of morning, look around them at the burnt husks of muscle cars at the dented trailers welded together and say, "Who lives here?" They move on to the national park, the Sin City. We become a story they will tell, the freaks in the desert, the mutants at the mountain, the wasteland. 3 times a day the bullet trains spirit into the earth and out again without a sound. Our teenagers ache to go with them, we know. This place is not a place of honor, say the Rubbings. No highly esteemed deed is commemorated here. Nothing of value is here. What is here is dangerous and repulsive to us. But it is autumn. Peak season is sliding away from us, and the red broom is exploding across the alluvial fans. Yucca Mountain is magenta with them, the stalks bowing all around the landscape of thorns. And the mole man seems to like it here. The oracle stirs powdered creamer into his coffee with one dignified, prehensile barble. Someone wonders, what if he's poisoning us? A good one, because we've long felt hard, lentil-sized nodes beneath our eyes, unshelled walnuts growing in our throats. Our water has tannins of uranium, and we have sores that will not heal, dark motes floating in our fields of vision, yellowing sclera blood in our stool. Our babies are born with webbed fingers and toes, or none. This message is a warning about danger, says the negative space within our malformed children's manic charcoal scribblings. The danger is to the body, and it can kill. You are in no danger, says the binder. Also, you are the only thing standing between the rest of the country and radiation poisoning. The oracle haunts the casino floor, lightly clacking the milky keratin of his claws together. He lurks near the roulette table, listening to the dolly pop along the wheel. Peak season is over, and the cocktail waitresses slip outside and cut spears from the aloe plants growing alongside the swimming pool. In the sports book, they sit him in a plush maroon chair and glide the slime over his burnt skin. In the buffet, the mole man gums his flaccid steak with his downturned catfish maw. The teenagers sit with him, build creamer pyramids, jelly huts, stab gashes into the vinyl seats with butter knives. Sometimes they bring maps. Tenderly, they trace the mole man's barbels along the interstate. Blow this popsicle stand, they say. Kill it, says the binder. But there is something of us in the mole man. Bonus play, express play, and multiplay are lost on him. And truth to be told, they are lost on us too. The white bullet trains come in and out thrice daily, soundless, only a slight pressing and unpressing of the air. One day, the repository will be filled, and it will be sealed, and it will stay that way for 100,000 years, says the binder. One day, all the toxic pellets we fear will be stuffed safely inside the mountain. The mountain will be sealed, and it will remain sealed through flash floods and ceaseless corrosion and the itchy trigger finger of tectonics. The binder says this, and we believe it, even though the trains that move through town so silently you cannot hear but only feel them. Those beautiful, soundless white bullets run on the throbbing rods they ferry. We considered ourselves to be a powerful culture. But we have questions the binder cannot answer. Is a mole man not a man? How many times did the U.S. Department of Energy say wasteland before this became one? How many times will they chant unpopulated before we disappear? What utterance will emerge from history's longest game of telephone? Why, of all the rubbings curling on all the refrigerators, all the etchings and all the message kiosks in all the desert repositories of this nation, do none of them say, "We are sorry"? The oracle does not speak, and we are glad. We could not bear to hear what he might say. Instead, we put our ears to the dirt at dawn. We can, maybe, hear a steady rock scrape a mile below. There are someones, somethings, moving through the trellis of tunnels under us, tending the pods of stainless steel caskets, inside the caskets rods, inside the rods pellets throbbing like glowworm larvae, though we've never seen the glow and never will, promises the binder. We take our iodine tablets. At night, if we lie still, we can feel the silent white bullet trains moving through us. We have the number to call, but we have long been unable to discern the poisoned from the yet to be poisoned. Peak season is over. Winter is coming to the desert, and there are things we want to see. The ground crunchy with frost. The dog's water bowl froze over. The Joshua trees along the highway decorated for Christmas. The red and green garlands winking in the sun. Tinsel swaying in the breeze of the bullet trains. Soon, the burros will eat the tinsel, and for weeks the good-natured BLM boys will spot strands of it glinting in their dung. We want to be here for that. We want to be here for the one day of snow, when our teenagers run outside in their pajamas to scrape the fine white dusting from the surfaces before it melts. Their flaxen roots grown out now, their eyebrows throbbing and infected. With their webbed fingers, they press an entire car's worth into one hard, divine, infinite snowball. Thank you. So if you do have any questions, I'd be happy to attempt to answer them semi-lucidly. I'm not reading in Nevada, which is a relief because I always have to anticipate and fend off the libertarian reading of that story. But I don't think I'll have to so much tonight. Oh, thanks, Brett.
I have a question about just what it was like to write these interesting sort of pieces of book interest, like the primer of the fauna and then like the form of Levi's clearance.
Oh, right.
Those like sort of big chunks that weren't
yeah.
posts. They were just, I mean, it's very interesting as a reader. But
I'll show you if you, those of you who are semi-close can see, there are some sections, these are what Rhett's talking about.
Yeah.
There's some pictures, and then there's another section that is in the form of a government questionnaire. Yeah, there, you know, it just, in short, it just seemed as if the content, the subject was demanding a certain form in certain instances. Particularly in the questionnaire, you know, I used to, my dearest old friend is a scientist and an engineer, and he's brilliant, and so he's been sort of recruited by like the war machine to I don't know what he does, but he has a very high clearance, and I am one of his references, so I mail these questionnaires semi-regularly, and I also am on the phone. I do interviews about his, you know, fitness and his professional life and private life and so on. And I always thought they were so much more revealing of the institution itself and the endeavor, the frame of mind, if you will, of the lab or the Department of Defense or whatever than they were of my friend. So I thought that would be a cool way to reveal some of the larger scope happenings of what's going on with this drought, you know, since some of the fun of being in a futuristic dystopian world is like making predictions, right? And so the questionnaire allowed me to make a lot of fun predictions, as did the primer, you know, like what if there is indeed this, as there is in the book, basically a giant sand dune field between Las Vegas and Los Angeles. Well, it's a brand new ecosystem that basically appears overnight in geologic time, and so what type of creatures might adapt and live there, and that was quite fun for me. But I can only say that it really just sort of insisted upon itself, those formal experiments, and I tried not to make them too precious or anything like that. But it's for you to decide, I guess.
Well, it's really cool to read.
Thank you. Yes, Star?
Your new mom, when you started writing this, did you entertain being compared it with pregnant?
Right, yeah.
Were you thinking about your child in the future that your children's children might have? Did you think about that? When
You
you
know,
were making?
I think, well, so the question was about parenthood and motherhood related to this book, and there is, it's one of the questions in the book. I turned this book in, and then I think I went into labor like 5 days later. And so it, you know, and it took me about 5 years to write. So it, in a way, you know, the fun thing about having books, I'm, you know, always very hard on my books, and I don't have a good, I'm hard on them after they come out. But the nice thing about having them, I'll say, is that it's like this personal record of where you were at. So these are these 5 years before having a child, and it starts in a very, you know, submerged, subconscious place where, you know, I was not really thinking about it at all, and then I followed the writing process, took me all the way through to marriage and conception, and if you're curious, I can tell you how that works later. Right, all the way until like very, very real, right up until labor. So it was a shifting attitude towards motherhood, as you can imagine. But I think it was one of those instances my friend Peter O. Davies talks about. We often assume that writers are writing about something that they've experienced, but I think just as often they're writing about something that they are anticipating or imagining or trying to figure out, how do I feel about motherhood? And you can very much see that in this book. It's sort of, what if my legacy is of unfitness, and yet this child materializes in my life, which is how it seemed to me, you know, about 6 years or so ago, that they just sort of ran and they were there. But I've since learned, no. And again, I can tell you all about that later. Thank you for that, Star. Yes?
I know you said earlier that it's not, you don't see this as like a climate fiction book. I was just curious about what you thought about the genre in general, like how did that be a genre?
Well, on the one hand, I think it's very astute, whoever pointed out that within, you know, dystopian literature, that there is a heavily climate influenced vein, and that makes sense to me. I mean, I think the first documentary film I ever saw in the theater was An Inconvenient Truth, and you know, I've kind of come of age along with climate change, and seeing it, you know, in all its manifestations, so that it makes sense that it would affect a generation of writers. So on the one hand, it's not as if I like deny that it's a phenomenon in contemporary literature, but on the other hand, I do think that it threatens to kind of, this isn't exactly the right phrasing, so forgive me, but it does, maybe could potentially ghettoize fiction into it's easy to say like, oh, I don't read that kind of thing, or that's just that, and I am not especially interested in fiction that has like an overt agenda or like a message. I think that's kind of a really good way to write a really bad piece of fiction. And when I hear something like climate fiction, I just kind of go like, ugh, what a downer, you know? Like, I don't want to read a bunch of like, climate. It's like going to Inconvenient Truth for 5 years or something, you know? I don't want to do that. So, yeah, I would be happy if it was considered climate fiction and a love story and eco-fabulous and a history of California, et cetera, et cetera. I think the most interesting books are you know, Frankensteins of many different genres anyway. So I don't have any particular beef with one single genre, but I wouldn't want to live there. You know, nice place I visit, wouldn't want to live there. Thank you for that very astute question.
I have a question.
Yes.
You obviously did a lot of research for this book. I was just wondering, did the idea come first and then you just kind of followed up with the research, or was it just, you know, things that you've heard about in school and that kind of planted the germ for this idea, like which chicken or the egg type thing? If that makes any sense.
It's hard to say, really, because it's all kind of like all the synapses are crackling at once. But I think the way I remember it is I was very stoned and watching an episode of Planet Earth. And it was the desert episode, and I was learning about the Gobi Desert and how big it was and how massive, and trying to get my head around that scale. And then I was like, what if there was a giant sand dune? It's a very stoner thought, like what if it was as big as the Himalayas, bro, you know? And then, like, to my dismay, I just kept wondering about it and kept writing about it. And for a long time, the like natural components of this world, the sand dune and the salt that's in the air and all of the creatures and all that stuff was like a secret, like my mistress book. And then I had another serious book of literary fiction that was going to win all the prizes, and it was just about a couple and they're deciding whether or not to have a child in the way that Star referenced. And then I realized that the kind of the thing I was really, so I was writing this kind of bloodless but competent work of literary fiction. And then I had this mistress novel of like sand, and then I'll write tens of pages just about the dirt and the rocks. And I eventually realized that the most interesting book would be a combination of those two, or that at least that was the book that I was really excited about writing, you know. So, who knows where it all kind of came from, but it's like one sort of feeds the other, right? Like you get a little bit of research and then that sparks your imagination and then that launches you back into more research, and there's this nice ping-ponging effect, for me at least. Thank you. Yes?
It sounds like you have a fair amount of experience working with younger writers. And what would you say is what kind of obstacles do you see, do you encounter with them, and what kind of advice do you end up finding that's most useful for them?
You know, it's tough to evaluate the usefulness. It will take some more time to see what's truly been useful. Because maybe you remember, but like the teachers that were most impactful to me would not have known it at the time. In fact, it's like 10 or 20 years down the road, you know, like I'm still thinking about that. But I do notice that the most exciting types of writing that I see and the most exciting trajectories for students have to do with their willingness to embrace the unknown and go towards, they usually are often at a type of fork in the road, like kind of like I was with like, I know this one book, like I know the book that's about a marriage and it's set in suburban Ohio, and they're talking about, and it's nothing to say that there's anything wrong with books like this. It's just in my version, it was a very controlled and fully known. This is a phrase from Robert Boswell. He talks about fully known narratives versus half-known narratives, which I think he just basically means like there's a type of writing where you've got it all figured out. And there's a type of writing where you're like, I don't know, oh, you know, you're like, I'm just holding on. And that's the thing that you have to go towards. You know, like that's why I was writing this, like I this stupid sand dune, like gotta go back to it, you know. I think it's more interesting and you grow faster if you can go, you know, once more into the breach, you know, like towards the unknown and the freaky. And I think it's a very good sign if you're a little bit confused or embarrassed by a synopsis of your own work. Like, I remember going on the job market and, you know, you give these talks about your work and then someone would say, what are you working on now? And I would just basically all of a sudden sound like I was pitching like a blockbuster movie. I'd be like, picture this. Giant sand dunes stretches from Las Vegas to Los Angeles, moonlight, glistening, and you know, I felt a little silly and I didn't understand, and I thought it was going to get cut up until the moment it went to print. But it's just on, like, the good stuff is very, very close to the bad stuff. I didn't know that. That's why I don't grade my students' work, because I tell them, you know, an A story, whatever that is very close to an F story. It's just a hair or two away, whereas a B or a C story is a true failure. Does that make any sense? You know, I think the wilder, weirder, unknown, the thing you can't write is the thing that you should write. Yes?
Did you have a similar experience writing Battleborn?
Yeah, I often felt very, well, I was writing Battleborn much more in a community because I was in an MFA program. So my routine was to go to this coffee shop every day. And I would arrive at 9 o'clock and I would write and eat lunch and take breaks and stretch and walk around the block. But mostly I would be writing until 4 o'clock. And 4 o'clock is when happy hour started. And all my friends were also in this coffee shop writing their own books. And we would switch from coffee to beer, and then we would start talking about what we were writing. And I felt so silly. Like, I'd be like, I don't know, I'm writing like a 9/11 story, but it's about rape. And they're like, good, yeah, it sounds great. But, you know, I always thought, like, you know, imagine if I may compare myself to Toni Morrison for just a moment. Imagine if Toni Morrison's like sitting down for a beer with her friends and she's like, I got this great idea for a book. Ghost baby has sex with her mom's boyfriend. And you're like, Toni, I don't know about that, but you know, that's so, it should be a little bit, it should really fail in the summary. Anytime a student comes to my office and like, I've got this story, I've got it all figured out. I'm like, oh no. Yeah, I don't like that, you know. And I've learned to get comfortable with it a little bit at least, but I still feel pretty absurd, which is fun. You can tell I kind of enjoy it. I think we have time for one more if anyone has one. Else we can just, yes, Jed.
I'm really curious about an essay, I mentioned it to you, the on-pandering essay, which blew me away, number one, and kind of opened my eyes to some things that I've been trying to figure out for a while anyway, but it ended up being really applicable to other writer friends outside of kind of the male-female, just because we're all kind of pandering to our literary forebears. And particularly for us, the Southern writers who grew up in suburbia, so we can't write Faulkner kinds of things anymore. I'm just curious how you see yourself negotiating that situation of recognizing you've got people that you respect and admire and you're writing to in some sense, but at the same time, you need to create your own voice and figure out your own road.
Yeah, that's such a thorny question. I'll give it a try. I think I have gotten a little bit more comfortable with influence and more embracing. I used to have kind of like a patricidal impulse in my writing where I had to, I don't know, I was sort of writing in the shadow of like these great male writers, but also wanted to do something that they'd never done before. And I think that was kind of crippling, and that did probably lead to a lot of my failed work in graduate school, was trying to write something sort of like timeless and for the ages. And what ended up working is actually the inverse, you know, localizing it and thinking like, there's my friend Beth at that table over there. And she is a brilliant poet and she doesn't suffer fools. She won't stand an ugly sentence. I want to see if I can like make something for her that she would like. Or what if, you know, there's my sister Beth and then also like my dad who drives a cab in Las Vegas. And, you know, so making my audience very small and very particularized, which is actually just a way of saying the thing that worked for me was trying to write writing that satisfied me and made me happy, rather than some external. And I hope that that's clear in non-pandering, is that I'm not necessarily talking about individual male writers so much as the mythos of them, like the wispy ghosts of them that come up, and they're amorphous. And the thing is, when you're trying to fight them, they're ghosts, man. Like your sword goes right through them, right? And you have, the good stuff I think comes from within, and you have to trust, if you're being very true to the language and being really rigorous with yourself and a rigorous attentive reader, I do believe that something special and individuating will come up. But I don't think it can really be, I don't think it's something that you can really train. I think you just have to get honest enough that it's coming from like a really pure and interesting place inside you, which I guess is why I'm pretty protective of. Like, I don't really want to understand my own work, and I don't really want to explicate it too much, or because I like the idea that what makes my work is coming from a place that's unknowable to me too. This like idea of being half known and mysterious. And another thing that's helped is reading a lot more widely and all different kinds of people, and remembering that, you know, diversity is not an ideal or something to put on like the university brochure. It's a fact, like it's a reality, a demographic reality of our society. It's also a facet of vibrancy in an arts culture, and diversifying my reading really energized. And I'm still working on that too, but so I don't know, you know, it's not as though I've got it all figured out. I'll say that.
It's a good exploration.
Thanks. Thank you. Thanks for coming on the ride with me. And thank you all for being here and listening. Really appreciate it.